Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of our attendees joining us today for this latest Data Science Central webinar. This is Bill Vorhies, your host. I'm a senior contributing editor with Data Science Central and also chief data scientist for Data Magnum. I'd like to start off our event today by thanking Alteryx for sponsoring today's event. Alteryx has been a longtime supporter of the Data Science Central community, and we're honored to have them sponsoring our event today. I'd also like to take this opportunity to mention and show our appreciation for some of our other recent sponsors, including Tableau, Microsoft, Pivotal, Oracle, IBM, and Teradata, to name just a few. These past webinars are available on demand at datasciencecentral.com, and if you haven't had an opportunity to view them, I encourage you to take a look. They provide some very useful insight into a wide variety of topics of current interest to our data science community. Today's webinar is entitled Faster Predictive Insight with Data Blending. And before we begin, I'd like to briefly review the format of today's webinar. This will be a 1-hour event today. We'll have 2 panelists that I'll introduce in just a minute. There will be a 10 to 15-minute Q&A following the presentation, and the event is being recorded and will be available on datasciencecentral.com in the next few days following today's live event. I'd also like to encourage our attendees to provide questions throughout the presentations. We'll be reviewing and presenting them on your behalf during the Q&A portion of today's event. I'm very pleased to introduce today's speakers, Ramnath Vaidyanath and Madden with Alteryx. Ramnath is a data scientist at Alteryx and is responsible for leading the roadmap for interactive visualization for predictive analytics. Prior to joining Alteryx, Ramnath was an assistant professor of operations management at McGill University. Ramnath is addicted to R and JavaScript and has developed several R packages like R charts, Solidify, and HTML widgets aimed at simplifying the process of creating interactive visualizations and web-friendly interactive documents from R. Matt is a director of product marketing at Alteryx and has over 16 years of experience in the analytics and enterprise software industry. During his career, he's held roles in sales and marketing, all with the same goal, to help organizations realize the power and benefit that analytics can have on their businesses. Thanks for being with us today. We're looking forward to your presentation. Predictive analytics is only as good as the data you're working with. This can be a challenge in today's line of business, where relying on multiple sources of data to deliver the insight has become the standard. Utilizing data blending eliminates these struggles and gets you to the data set you need faster. In today's webinar, you'll learn how to access the right types and systems of data, prepare, cleanse, and join multiple data sets, implement predictive analytics in a flexible environment, and deliver a repeatable process for future analysis. Matt, Ramnath, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can begin as soon as you're ready to go.
Thank you, Bill. And thanks again to everybody that was able to attend today's webinar, Faster Predictive Insight with Data Blending from Alteryx. And the full purpose of today's webinar is really to give you an understanding of what data blending is and how it can help speed up and improve the process of delivering predictive analytics in your organization and within your environment. Before I go into the specifics around data blending, I want to give everybody a little idea of who Alteryx is in case you're not familiar with who we are. We're the leader in data blending and advanced analytics. We have over 900 plus customers around the world, and you can see some of the biggest customers out there in terms of Fortune 500, people like Ford, McDonald's, Experian, just to name a few. And we also are built upon a strong foundation, not only from a technological standpoint, but from an investment standpoint. We deal a lot with analysts throughout organizations. They use us specifically for data blending and advanced analytics. And so much so that we have over 95% plus renewal rate in terms of people that continue to use us on a year-to-year basis from our subscription model pricing. In addition, we have a lot of support from venture capital firms that help us not only expand our presence around the globe, but also help us improve our technology and become more innovative with what we can deliver from a technological standpoint. So many of you probably aren't that familiar with the term data blending. And for those of you that might be new to it, let's examine what exactly data blending is. So data blending is the process of combining data from multiple sources to reveal deeper insight that drive better business decisions. So what it is, it's different than something like data integration and data warehousing because its primary use is not to create that single unified version of the truth that can then be stored in the system of record. It's rather used by analysts, typically in the line of business, to build an analytic data set to assist in answering specific business questions or even drive a particular business process in a lot of cases. This next slide is going to be something that probably all of you are familiar with, and that's the predictive analytic process. We're going to examine how data blending fits into this process, where it really focuses on and what different aspects can help in improving not only your predictive modeling and your predictive outcomes, but the process that leads up to building those models. So the impact data blending has on that process really focuses on three, or actually four stages within that process. The business understanding phase, because analysts are trying to answer that business question, and typically this is an analyst in that line of business that I talked about, that data blending really, targets. These people in the line of business understand their problem. They have an idea what data can impact that problem. But typically the issue for them is understanding that data they have and getting it in the right format to answer that specific business question. And this is really where data blending, excels. You'll see here that most analysts on average will spend anywhere from 5 to, let's say, 15% of the time trying to determine what question they want to answer, what business problem they want to solve, and then another 5 to 10% looking at their data to see what is under the cover, so to speak. And then the majority of the time they spend is on preparing that data. And a lot of different reports say it can be up to 80% of the time that they're spending preparing that data for analysis. We all know that in order to do any sort of analysis, though, it really starts with the data, and getting access to all that right data is critical in any sort of process, and particularly when you're trying to build out a predictive model. Let's understand what the 5 steps of data blending are and where they can impact this predictive analytics cycle. As I stated, it really starts with getting access to all the relevant data, but data blending actually begins with the analysts themselves in trying to determine what question they want to solve or business process they want to have an impact on. Only then can you determine what data is necessary to impact that analysis. So it's really critical to get the data that you need without having to rely on others in that process. And that's one of the ways to really speed up the analytic process and getting that data ready. So getting that data and then understanding what your data really begins that next phase in that process. But where data blending makes the biggest impact is around what you'll see as step 3, 4, and 5, and that's preparing, cleansing, transforming, and joining or blending those multiple sources of data. This allows analysts to flip that process around and spend less time on preparing the data and more time on the analysis itself. And we'll show you a little bit more in detail in the demo on how this is done and what we really mean by being able to speed up that process. So how does Alteryx do this from a technology standpoint or a solution standpoint? What we do is we give you access to all the relevant data you need. That could be on your desktop, it could be in the cloud, it could be sitting in a database. It could be spatial data. It doesn't really matter. We give you the ability to access that data. Once you access that data, you can then bring that data in, cleanse it, prepare it, remove duplicates, whatever you need to do, and join that data together. We're even uniquely positioned to offer third-party package data to enrich your analysis from Experian, TomTom, Dun & Bradstreet. And then once you build that analytic data set, you can push it out in the same workflow environment and build some sort of analysis on that. That could be your traditional statistics. It could be predictive analytics. It could be spatial analysis. It doesn't matter. And then once you run that analysis, you can send it out to a static report, an analytic application, or out to a visualization like Tableau or Click, or even push it back to a database. So enough talking about how we do things. Now I'm going to take some time and give you a brief demonstration on how data blending actually works, and in particular how Alteryx actually works. So give me a second here while I launch my desktop. Okay. So the demonstration I'm going to go through is to show you how to access, prepare, and blend data from different disparate sources to perform some sort of aggregation for analytical purposes. This example is really going to focus on merging store data, customer data, and transaction data to create a view of customers in terms of their total number of purchases and total spend. So as you see, this is the Alteryx platform, the Alteryx canvas, so to speak. It's a drag and drop environment, and you'll see at the very top there's several different tools for different tasks that you can perform throughout an analytic process. We have the ability to bring in data from a wide range of sources. You'll see here there's different input tools we can bring and different output tools that we can send information to. There's also the ability to stream in data from a database. There's different connectors to bring in data from cloud sources such as Amazon, Hadoop, Marketo, MongoDB, Salesforce, just to name a few. And then finally, there's a couple different types of social media data that you can bring in as well. So if we start to bring in data, you know, it's as simple as dragging a tool onto the canvas and accessing the data we want. We can connect directly to a database. We can bring in data from a wide range of different types of files. It can be, you know, a database. It can be map info, Access, Excel, SAS, SPSS, XML. It doesn't matter. In this case, we're going to bring in a simple Excel file. That's the store information. And you can see here when you're bringing in data, we have the ability to simply bring in that sheet itself. We can store procedures if we're doing something on a repeatable basis, or we can write our own SQL if we need to. In this case, we're going to bring in the data, and we're going to see here we get a brief preview on the side. You'll see once the data is loaded, you get a brief preview on the side here that shows the store ID, the address, the city and state, and also some store information such as latitude and longitude. Now, at any time throughout the analytic process, we can bring in what's called a browse tool. And what this browse tool will allow us to do is it will allow us to get a better overview of the data at any point throughout the analytic process. So this just gives us a wider range view of the data rather than a small preview box on the left. Okay? So let's go ahead and bring in all three of our data sources. So we brought in an Excel file. The next thing we want to do is we want to bring in our customer data. And the customer data is stored in a CSV file. Simply go through the same process, and you'll see on the left that we have customer ID, we have store number, customer segmentation, whether or not they've responded, and then their contact information, first name, last name, address, etc. So the final stage of data that we want to bring in is we're going to bring in some transactional data. Now, transactional data in this case is going to be coming from an XML file. And we have customer ID, what product they bought, what the total cost was, and the order number. Okay, so once we've brought in all that data, the next logical thing you want to do is really understand or investigate that data. Now, Alteryx has a wide range of data investigation tools. You'll see here we have frequency table, we have histogram, distribution analysis, field summary plots, scatter plots, contingency, and association analysis. For this demo, we're going to bring in a contingency table. And what we want to do here is we want to focus on, we want to bring this down to our customers. And here we want to focus on what customer segment is giving us the best response rate. We add in the contingency table, we add a browse tool here, and we simply hit run. And what this is going to do is it's going to give us an interactive report. And this interactive report is going to allow us to really understand where our responses are coming from. What segments do we really want to focus on for our analysis moving forward? So you'll see here we have the corporate segment is giving us the most no's, but yet it's also giving us the most yeses. You know, we have the ability to really dig into this and look at it from several different angles. We can look at it from a percentage standpoint. We can change the way the graph looks or the chart looks and find out what might be the best approach here when we're going to run some sort of analysis. So this is just one of the tools that we can focus on when we're doing some sort of data investigation in this process here in Alteryx. Okay? Well, let's get rid of that for now. So in other situations, you know, you could probably look at an association analysis or a frequency table to see, you know, what things are similar, what the difference is in terms of counts, etc. The next logical step after we bring in the data is to get that data ready for analysis. Data preparation for us would be a wide range of capabilities. We have things like an autofield tool, and what this will allow you to do is if you're dealing with a lot of data, let's say our transactional data was, you know, hundreds of millions of different types of data that I was bringing in. What this could do is it would drag in here and it would automatically set the variable type. Everything from an XML file comes in as a string, the autofield would automatically set that. There's other things like the ability to do sorts, filters, formulas, the ability to deal with missing data like imputations here. But the most widely used tool for most of our customers here is this select tool. And what this select tool will do is we can use this to deselect fields that we don't want to include in the analysis. We can rename fields. We can change the type or description of that data in many instances. So for this one, we're going to look at the store file, and we want to simply do some renaming here. The reason I say that is it just kind of shows you some of the flexibility of the tool itself. And here we're just going to change the name of latitude and longitude so that it's fully laid out. And we can do the same thing for the customer data. And we'll go into some details around why we're doing this now as we move along in this process. Okay, so we've changed the latitude and longitude. Now we could also do things like eliminate things that we don't want to include in the analysis. So if we wanted to get rid of the unknowns, we could do that. If we wanted to change the variable type, we could do that. Everything looks okay here. For instance, if we wanted to say, let's get rid of their first name and last name, we don't really care. We have their customer ID. We could do that. Okay. So one of the unique things about Alteryx is our ability to handle a wide array of data. And this includes spatial data. Many times organizations have access to spatial or location-based data, but they don't have the right tools to do anything with it. So you'll see here Alteryx has several spatial tools available to deal with things like geocoding, trade area analysis, spatial matching, drive time analysis, so understanding how long it takes somebody to either drive or how far they are from a certain point, and several different others. So in this case, we simply just want to create some points on a map. So we can drop these create points in, and you'll see that we changed the latitude and longitude to really focus on those key points. If, obviously if we wanted to look at different things, we could, but in this case, it would return some bad information. So we'll match these two data points. And the next thing we want to do is we're ready to join these two files together. If we go to our join tools, there's several different capabilities for joining and matching data. There's the ability to append data, doing things like fuzzy matching. So if you have a John Smith J-O-N and a John Smith J-O-H-N, they have the same address. The fuzzy matching would allow you to simply clean up that data and join the right data and have one single form of customer data there. There's other things we can do like unionize data. So a lot of people will use this if they have different tabs within an Excel spreadsheet that are the same and they want to get one single view of that. But in this case, we're simply going to join that data with our join tool. And you see here the ability to do a left join, an inner join, and then a right join. For this, we're going to focus on our store ID on the left, so coming from the left side, and the store number on the right. And we will insert a browse after the join and simply hit run. And what we get now is that join data set. You'll see here we have store ID coming from this side, store ID coming from the right side, along with all the customer information that we needed. Now there's different things we could do during this join period. If we didn't want to have two sets of customer IDs, we could simply go in here and remove customer ID from one of these different sources. If we wanted to see what that data was coming out from the left join and right join, we could add browse tools to that as well. So there's a lot of different options we could go from there. So now that we've combined these two data files, we're now ready to do some data preparation and transformations on the transaction data. So if you remember, the transaction data came in as an XML file. So we're going to need to change some of the types within that data since we want to look at the total number of sales and the total cost of purchases. So to do that, we're going to simply bring in another select tool here. And you'll see the sales came in as a string. So we know this is a number. We want to change that to a double. Now, Alteryx has other ways of dealing with various formats of data like XML or unstructured data. If we look at our parse tools, our parse capabilities, we have the ability to do XML parsing or regular expression as well. So there are many different things you can do based on your data and your needs. So this one is pretty simple. We're just changing the sales information to double. And then the next thing we want to do is transform and aggregate that data. We can go into our transformation tools and pull down this summarize tool here. And what this is going to allow us to do is basically group this information and build out a view of the data that we want to look at. Think of it as similar to doing something like a pivot table. So we want to group customers, and then we want to take a look at sales, and we want to look at the number of sales, and we want to look at the sum of sales. So we can look at the sum of sales, or we can just say, hey, this is going to be our total sales. Okay, so now we're ready to take this transaction data and combine it with the store and customer data. We simply go into our join tools again, and this time we're going to be looking at the data, and we're going to be focusing on our customer ID. So we'll do customer ID from the left side and customer ID from the right. Now, as I mentioned before, there's things we can do when we're building out this analytic data set. If we want to get rid of the actual customer data or customer ID, and we only want to have one customer ID, we can get rid of the customer ID coming from the left side, so that when we do our join, we're getting that join of just one customer ID. It's showing up with just one customer ID. Okay? So we've built out our customer, our store ID, our address, our customer ID here, and then we have our count and our total sales. So we know who the customer is, how many times they've purchased, and how much money they've spent. A lot of people can probably then take this and use it to build out some sort of marketing program, run some sort of analysis on it, such as recency, frequency, monetary value. But a lot of people will then take this and either push it back to a database, push it out to a visualization tool like Tableau or Click. Others will take this and put it into an analytic application that can be run in a browser-based environment and generate some sort of report or charts on it. Or they can even do what we are going to talk about here in this webinar, is incorporate it into a predictive model. Now, if we want to do that, let's take a look at a fully built-out process here. So you'll see that we've taken the same data. We have our store information, our customer ID, or excuse me, our customer information, and our transactional data. We then, one second here. We then join that data together, and in this case, they've added some sort of drive time analysis to that process. And then the next thing we can do is we can build out that process and incorporate a predictive model. Sorry, I'm having a couple of browser issues in terms of scrolling. So you'll see here, we've built out a logistic regression. Now, Alteryx has quite a few different options to do predictive analysis. We have over 60 plus tools to do predictive and spatial analysis. Over 30 plus tools for predictive itself. There's different modeling tools available: A/B analysis, boosted model, count regression, linear regression, just to name a few. The ability to do time series analysis, clustering, nearest neighbor, k-centroids, those types of things. And it's the same thing. You're simply dragging the icon or that tool onto the platform, selecting your parameters, and building out that process. Now, the unique thing about our predictive tools is they are built upon the R programming language. And what I mean by that is this is simply a tool that was built upon the R processes. So we can go in and open up this tool itself and look at the process or the underlying technology that takes place that was used to build out this macro, so to speak. So you'll see here, anybody that knows R can go in, take a look at the R language, understand what was written, how it's delivered, and even go in and modify it if they need to. So it's a flexible environment. The other thing we can do here is, instead of bringing in something like an Alteryx predictive tool, we can go in, and if we know R, we have the ability to bring in this R tool. And this R tool can then be connected to the process, and you can bring in your own R script if you have one, or you can write your own. So with that, the key here is around data blending is the ability to build out this workflow process. And from here, a lot of times, people will simply save this workflow, either save it as a macro or a process, and simply update the information on a weekly, daily, or however much they need to update it. And this really builds out that data preparation and data blending process to speed up the delivery to then build out those predictive models. So that, in a nutshell, is data blending. And what I'm going to do now is turn it back over to Ramnath. So let me stop sharing. And as we move along in this process, we're going to highlight some of the other aspects that Alteryx has when it comes to predictive analysis.
Thanks, Matt. So as Matt pointed out, Alteryx has several tools, pre-built tools for predictive modeling, grouping, and time series, and you can also write your own models using R. So it's a very flexible environment to be doing data analytics, blending, and predictive analytics. We also have the ability to output to other formats like SPSS or SAS, so that you can take advantage of existing models. So as Matt pointed out, you could do the data blending in Alteryx and then push it out to SPSS or SAS if you already have models that work on that. But my focus for the next few minutes is going to be on predictive analytics within Alteryx using R. So this is a screenshot of a workflow, and I'm going to highlight a few things here that corresponds to how data scientists would typically build a predictive model. So the leftmost node here, the one that's blue in color, so that's your data, and essentially, whenever you do any predictive modeling exercise, you break the data down into three samples. So you have an estimation sample, you have a validation sample, and you have a holdout sample, and you can see the three outputs from that node. So what we're doing here is we're taking the estimation sample, and then you look at all the icons that are brown in color. These are a couple of the predictive models within Alteryx. So we're using the same estimation sample and feeding it into different predictive models. So the first is a decision tree, then you have a random forest, you have a gradient boosted model, and then you have a logistic regression model. The estimation sample gets fed into each model, and what we get out from these, apart from the reports, is an O output that you see right on top of each of the brown icons. That's the model output. So using the estimation sample, feeding it to the different predictive tools, getting the model output, and then joining these model outputs, as you can see with the icon that's purple in color, the join tool. Now, the next thing that as data scientists we want to do typically is to see how these models work, right? So essentially what we're doing, the tool that you see right on the extreme right, that's a lift chart tool. So what we're doing here is we are feeding all the model outputs, model objects, and we're feeding the validation sample and then saying, okay, now create a lift chart for me so that I can look at which model performs the best for the validation sample. And based on that, you can choose what model you're going to go ahead with. And finally, the last piece is the holdout sample, and you're going to then apply the best model, you're going to apply it on the holdout sample so that you're able to then do whatever process of predictive analytics you've been working on. So it could be you're trying to score something, you're trying to predict the probability of a customer defaulting. So any of these things you can then apply on the holdout sample, and that's how you would get your output. So in summary, Alteryx essentially supports a very visual way to carry out these analysis, but at the same time gives you the flexibility to write really custom R code, as well as, of course, use existing pre-built analytics tools that we have. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt.
Thank you, Ramnath. And if it's something you would like to try out on your own, we do have a fully functioning 14-day trial that you can simply go to alteryx.com/download and try it for yourself. And it includes all the predictive tools that we talked about and showed, all of the information and icons that I displayed within the demonstration as well. And there's several different sample files that you can take a look at and play around with as well. And with that, I think we're ready for some questions and answers, Q&A.
Hey, Matt, Ramnath, thank you very much for that excellent presentation. We'll get started with today's Q&A session. And I want to thank the audience for their participation. We have a great many questions that have come in during the presentation, and we'll do our best to get through them all in the time remaining. So during this Q&A session, I'll leave up this screen, which has contact information for both Ramnath and Matt, should you wish to contact them directly following today's webinar. So let's get started with the questions. Several folks were obviously very impressed with the fact that you could bring in data from so many different sources, but they asked, do you also include connectors for the major ERPs like SAP or Oracle or PeopleSoft?
So we do have connectors into Oracle. SAP and other things are something that we're looking to add in the near future. So just keep an ear out for that, I should say. But it is something that we've explored, and most of what we develop comes from prospect requests and customer requests. So we do listen to the market, and we also listen to what our customers' needs are. So yeah, keep a lookout for new connectors coming in the near future.
Excellent. Well, thank you. There were a number of questions around the capability of Alteryx to handle large data sets. So I guess they would include multiple questions along this line. For example, how large a data set can be entered into Alteryx? That is, what is the upper limit? Is the data actually stored in Alteryx, or can this be in memory?
So the processing engine for Alteryx is in memory. I don't think we actually have a limit in terms of how much data you can bring in, but a lot of it's going to depend on your machine. But the way that Alteryx does the in-memory processing is really almost like a hybrid. So it brings it in, it stores some of it in a temp and some of it in memory. So it's still processing it super fast. And if you're playing, or if you've used any other analytical tools out there that do in memory or do write to disk, you'll notice that when you're working in Alteryx, that it is super fast. And we've done a lot of different benchmarks around different competitors out there, and each time, we've been inwards and upwards of 5 to 100 times faster than a lot of them out there.
That's remarkable. Remarkable. Some of the questions about the predictive capability of your system. The first one, I guess, is do the predefined predictive machine language that Alteryx have include prescriptive tools like operations research optimization elements?
Ramnath, you want to go ahead and answer?
Yeah, I can take that. Yeah, so we don't have optimization capabilities currently, but it's on the roadmap, and essentially you can do it using some of the R packages that do optimization. So using the R tool, you can do it right now, but as pre-packaged modules, that's something on the roadmap, pretty high on our list. So again, as Matt said, keep an ear out. We should be having things around optimization.
Great, thank you. And some questions about exporting code and the type of code. So, for example, when your model is complete, can you describe how you would export the final code so that you could plug it into your own base? And specifically, will the code include Python?
I can take
Ramnath,
that.
you want to go? Yes.
Yeah. So the last word you mentioned is Python?
Python, yes.
Okay. So essentially, as Matt indicated in the demo, our predictive analytics modules are all currently R-based, and pretty much all the predictive tools we have, they have a model out. They can output the model object itself, which you can then bring it into R in a separate session and work with it. We don't have the ability to work with Python right now, but you could use, there are packages that allow people to kind of export objects from R to Python. I think it's a package called rpy2. So we don't support that natively, but I mean something that you could use if you want to explore things further in Python or a different language.
Thank you. Great answer. Now here's one of our viewers that really is thinking ahead toward master data management, and the question is there a way to use Alteryx to actually adjust incorrect data within the data sources themselves?
Is there a way? Go ahead.
Yeah, so there are some very basic imputation tools that we have within Alteryx, which allow you to kind of plug some of the missing data. So that would be one way to do it. Another way would be to use, our packages to do it in a more statistical fashion. We don't have any tools on the predictive side currently that do this automatically, but you could use these R packages to sort of do data imputation. So native imputation capabilities, there is a tool, impute tool, which you can use, and also then use R to do more with it.
Okay, so I would use the imputation tool developed in Alteryx to feed back into my original database to revise or modify or add additional modified data. Am I correct in my understanding?
Right.
Okay, good. And can you just run down the list of advanced analytics that are offered in Alteryx, scenario, sensitivity, elasticity, goal seeking, so forth?
So the list you've described all seems to be all connected with optimization. So I think my answer would be that for sensitivity analysis, goal seeking, these would all be addressed when we tackle the optimization piece in the roadmap that I just talked about. So we don't have that currently in the product, but something that's under development.
Okay, thank you. Now we've had a couple of questions regarding big data, NoSQL, which I always interpret really to mean variety. So the question is, what is the capability of Alteryx to load and analyze text data? Or let's expand that to semi-structured data.
Yeah. So
okay,
go ahead. You want to take that?
Go ahead, Matt. I would just
Okay.
Go ahead.
So basically, the way we would handle unstructured or text data is it really depends on what you're looking for from a text or unstructured data aspect. We can't do sentiment analysis at this point, if that's what you're asking. The only way you would be able to do that is to rely on some sort of R capabilities. But in terms of unstructured or semi-structured data, we have the ability to parse data that's unstructured or semi-structured. A lot of people I know that use our tool also can rely on regular expression to handle some of that text analysis as well. And then simply, bringing in that R tool. So it's really a flexible environment to do a lot of different things. Ramnath, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I also want to add that when the question was on NoSQL databases as well, so we do have support to kind of interface with MongoDB, which is a NoSQL database. So yeah, so we don't have the text analytics, but you can interface with some of the NoSQL databases.
Terrific. Well, thank you. Clearly one of the most interesting features of Alteryx is its ability to bring in third-party external databases. Can you just run down what the major ones are and what their examples of their usage might be that are particularly creative?
So bringing in sorry, can you repeat the question?
I'm thinking, the Experian data and the geolocation data, and yeah.
Yeah. So what we do is we have the ability to package third-party data with our software. So you can buy our software packaged with Experian household data, Dun & Bradstreet, and obviously the census, which can be accessed by anyone for free. And then finally TomTom. And what it does is it gets shipped to you. It's a massive amount of data, so we ship it to you on a separate drive that you're then able to use it to enrich your data.
Yeah, data enrichment is always a key element in producing a good predictive model. So I really appreciate that personally as a long-time predictive modeler. Would you speak again to the issue of how you export code? What are the languages in which you export your production code at the end? And are these processes, thanks to your drag and drop, are they fully repeatable?
Yeah, so in terms of exporting code, most of what we do is, code free, but anything we can read, we can write to. So depending on where you're bringing the data from, that data can go directly back to it. We do have the ability to save this workflow and make it repeatable. So once you build out that workflow process, it's simply, you can save that workflow, you can rerun that data, you can connect it to a database and have it automatically scheduled to rerun on a daily or weekly basis. So I guess I would need some clarification in terms of what they mean by code. What kind of code can it be exported to?
I would imagine that this is the migration of the output of Alteryx into a production environment and how that might best be accomplished.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, what you would probably have to do is build out that workflow and export that data directly into whatever system of records you're using or external database.
Okay. All right. Makes sense. And by the way, for the predictive modelers in the crowd, do you support PMML language?
At this time, we do not. We do give you the ability to export directly to SAS or SPSS, though. Yes,
that's fine. And obviously, those can both produce PMML out of their output side. We talked briefly about R, and I know you touched on that in your demonstration. Can you tell us a little bit more about the procedure for bringing in R and how easy or difficult that might be as a result?
Yeah. So actually, Alteryx has one of the most transparent procedures for dealing with bringing data into R and getting data out of R. So the basic idea is that whenever you're bringing data into R, it's using named pipes. So if I'll kind of make a comparison between how we would bring in data in our studio or in our console. You would probably do something like read.csv, give the file name, and essentially read it in as a data frame. So in Alteryx, what you're going to do is instead you're going to say, okay, read.alteryx, and then you're going to give the name of the pipe. So the name of the pipe is essentially where the data is coming from. And once you do that and you assign that to an object, then that object contains your data frame. So essentially, it's just replacing one line of code to kind of get your data into R within Alteryx. And very similarly, the output also works the same way. So you could, instead of using write.csv, you could just use write.alteryx. And in this case, it's going to push the data back into the Alteryx pipeline for further processing. Or if you just want to dump it directly to an R object, you can use any of the R functions like save or even write.csv to dump the data back to disk. So in short, it's a very, very flexible, just a couple of lines of code, a couple of functions that change that allow you to bring in data and get data out. The rest of it is as if you're just writing R code in your favorite IDE.
And while we're on the topic of R, one of our viewers has asked which R libraries are included in Alteryx or allowed by Alteryx.
Well, so we have a lot of libraries included, and if you go to the predictive page on Alteryx, it lists all the packages. There is no limit on the packages that you can bring in, so you could go ahead and install packages that don't come with Alteryx, and then Alteryx would just pick it up. So there is really no limit in terms of what packages you can use.
Terrific. Okay, cool. We haven't talked about data visualization. Can you tell us something about the data visualization capabilities within Alteryx, or what data viz tools you support?
Sure. So from a visualization standpoint, we do have some interactive visualizations that I highlighted in the data investigation, and we also have some within the predictive tools that our own Ramnath here has been developing. But if you're looking for standard visualization tools that are out there in the market, like Tableau and Qlik, those are our two biggest supports in terms of data visualization. We output directly into a TDE file for Tableau and a QBX for Qlik. So we have some strong integration with those two products to basically output directly into a workbook or dashboard environment in those two products. Ramnath, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about some of the interactive visualizations that you've developed within the product itself.
Yeah, so just continuing with what Matt spoke about. So on the predictive analytics side, essentially on all the modeling side, one of the things we've been working on is basically embellishing the outputs with interactive JavaScript HTML-based visualizations, one of which Matt demoed the association analysis. So on the predictive side, we are building native tools, and the idea here is that model outputs that R provides typically are kind of hard to interpret sometimes, and especially when you have a lot of data, like producing static scatter plots and static charts does not really cut it. So we've been kind of pushing and investing a lot of time and effort into coming up with interactive visualizations, highly curated interactive visualizations for predictive analytics. So these won't have the same flexibility as you would expect with something like Tableau or Qlik, but given that the use case is a little different, we try to kind of curate it and provide exactly what a modeler would expect in these outputs. So we introduced a few of them in the previous release. In the next release, we're going to be introducing a lot more of these tools.
Terrific. Some of our viewers are clearly thinking ahead to really using Alteryx in a production role. For example, some questions relate to the issue of whether or not Alteryx can be part of a scheduled enterprise workflow for planning, say, automatically run once a month against particular data sets.
Yes, and I'll just kind of go back to some of the things I talked about. Is once you build out that workflow, it can be scheduled to run. I think the soonest it can run is like every 5 minutes if you really need to schedule it that way. It can be productionized and automated, so it is something that can easily update with new information, or it can feed some other process within the enterprise.
Okay, all right. And one of our viewers has asked if you could please share some industry-specific examples that would highlight the benefit of Alteryx, for example, in manufacturing or sales or automotive or some other similar industry.
Yeah, I mean, we have specific solution pages on our website that have, details of customers talking about their use cases from previous user conferences. But I think the process of data blending is universal and goes across all industries. Everybody has data. Everybody has to get that data ready for something. So many of these people are using us to get that data. Maybe they're working in Excel. Maybe they're dealing with Access in something in Oracle or Salesforce, and they're really preparing that data to build out some sort of report or do some sort of analysis or processes. So it's really a lot of different use cases. There's people in retail that use us to help understand where they should put their new stores, or where they should, what kind of products they should have in stock based on the demographic information that they get from the Experian data, those types of things. So there's a lot of different things you can do. It's really amazing in terms of the different types of use cases people are building out their data for.
Indeed, indeed. And one of the things that comes immediately to mind is that Alteryx is clearly so much more than an ETL tool. Just to make sure everybody understands, would you like to compare Alteryx to a standard ETL tool so that everybody understands the difference?
Yeah, the way that a lot of people will refer to us is that, you know, a lot of our users will say it's almost like a personal ETL. And the reason they say that is because, you know, they can access all this data. They can do all this data preparation and data transformations all on their own. They're not having to rely on somebody else to do it. They're not having to write SQL, for instance. But at the same time, they're also able to do a lot more with it. They're able to incorporate the predictive analytics. They're able to incorporate spatial analysis and then build reports upon it. So it's more than just, you know, accessing and preparing and integrating that data. There's so much more you can do. And one thing I didn't even touch on that can kind of go back to the deploying it into an enterprise environment is we do have that ability to do in-database processing. So if you have data that's stored in, let's say, SQL or Oracle, and your IT department doesn't want you working with that data or moving that data, you can simply use the in-database tools to build out that process and run all of that analysis within the database.
Clearly a remarkable tool. And that really has answered pretty much all of the questions that have come in from the viewing audience. So Matt, Ramnath, thank for some great answers to some very good questions. For those of you who have asked questions that weren't answered today, we'll be sending all the unanswered questions to Ramnath and Matt, along with the team at Alteryx, so they can follow up with you after today's webinar. I have just a few quick announcements. If you'd please mark your calendars for July 21st and our next Data Science Central webinar, which is IoT, How Data Science-Driven Software is Eating the Connected World, sponsored by Pivotal. Sounds like fun. Also, today's taping will be available on demand for viewing later today and can be found on the home page of Data Science Central in the Webinar tab located at the top of the page. So this brings today's webinar to a close, and I'd like to thank our audience for their attendance and thoughtful questions, and a special thanks again to Alteryx for their sponsorship, and our speakers today, Ramnath Vaidyanath and Matt Madden, for their insight into today's topic. My name is Bill Vorhies. I'm very pleased to have been your host for today's event, and I look forward to seeing you all again on July 21st. Have a great day.